Good morning. I shouldn't say good morning. It's good evening. I was just checking whether you all allot or not after a busy day. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight is a very important night because we are having our AGM as well as part of the today's session. So if you're joining us for the first time maybe in the floor or maybe online, welcome. And I just want to welcome on behalf of the executive committee. So we have our team, Ralitza, Kevin, Pradeep, Darren, Prasad, and Shah with us today. And our president is an apology for today. But thank you everyone for your time. So without further ado, we'll kickstart the presentation. I'm just trying to do multitasking, trying to change the presentation online as well. So just bear with me. So tonight we got a couple of speakers, which I will get into it. So today we have speakers from EPSD, District Strategies and Draft Territory Plan. They're going to talk about it. And then we have Kat going to talk about the land care in Gungahlin and Junindri Catchment Group. And then we also have a presentation about the Gungahlin Rural Block 348 retirement living concept and aged care. So that'll be presented as well as part of today's meeting. So I think I'll just keep going with the slides. And some of the slides, what you see, the online may not be updated as to the one we have in the floor, but all our slides will be available on the website sooner or later. So the minutes from AGM, 2021, it's all available online. So you can go to our website where you can find them online. It's all available. And I just want to take a moment to read through the President report. So last year, it has been a busy year for Gungahlin Community Council. We did a lot of engagement for those who just joined or maybe were not aware of what we do. We work as a middleman between the government and the community, and then we've been having a lot of engagement. We do a lot of surveys. We did a lot of meetings. All the information's been updated on the website, and we have the social presence as well. We do have a magazine, Gunsmoke, which goes bi-monthly or monthly, which covers all the major activities that we cover in this area. So if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, please do so, because there are so many new articles coming soon. And as part of this year, we've been engaged with a lot of the news media. We've been constantly engaging with the ministers, MLAs. We did a couple of night outs with the MLAs, the MLAs of Gungahlin, and we had a good sessions. We were able to explain what the community wants and stuff, so it was good. And next slide, please. So the ACT planning system review is up on board. I think that's one of the key thing. As well as there's another thing happening. The East Gungahlin placemaking consultancy and then the district planning workshop. So we take this opportunity to the community to make sure that you participate and provide your comments. That would be very valuable. And last year, we also supported a couple of community events. Also, we sponsored a few of those, the Rotunda, along with the friends in Yarraby. We worked along, and then we were able to sponsor the concrete for the Rotunda. And, we also did a campaign, signed the petition to suspend the land sale in Gungahlin, especially with the, selling all those residential, converting all those commercial blocks into residential, and so many issues were happening. So we did a petition as well last year, and it went really well. The community were behind us, and we were able to make a strong voice of the community and present it to the government, which happened. And we've also been advocate of all this, the issues happening around Gungahlin in terms of infrastructure and stuff. So last year it's been a very, very busy year. And with the Treasurer's report as well, I'll just quickly go through the Treasurer's report. Before that, I'll just give me one sec. The balance sheet, profit and loss, review statement, it's all available online as well. So I'll just quickly read through what we got. And if you're watching online, the slides may not be updated, but by all means, it will be available online soon. So the profit and loss statement, I think it shows for the income from the ACT government operating grants. So we had 12,281. The events ACT grant for Celebrate Gungahlin, which we did, 15,964. And then we also did, as I said, the Gungahlin newsletter, the Gunsmoke production and printing. It cost around 7,439, and the insurance was 2,410. I want to thank Kevin and Ralitza for doing all the hard work in getting the newsletter out, and it was great. And the balance sheet shows the historic cash reserve as well, which supported the investment in the Rotary Arabi Rotunda, which we saw in the previous picture, which around 8,500. And the payment and income for Celebrate Gungahlin spread across multiple financial year, which makes the accounts harder to read, but it should be available online. Because of the COVID, most of our meetings have been online, just like rest of the world. So there was a less spending on the venue and catering. So the finance statement reviewed and approved. Apology on behalf of the Treasurer, he couldn't be here today to make this presentation. All right, let's move on to the next bit, which is the appointments of GCC Executive Committee. So at the moment, all the position will be vacant, and we will form a new committee. So there will be appointment of public officer, office bearers, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and appointment of general executives will be happen now. So I just want to thank a few people as well when I do the presentation, which I will do. So usually we will get the public officer to run this particular piece of work, but at the moment we haven't got the public officer, so I will be doing it. So for the year 2022-23, we have the new committee. The nominations were there. So the nominations by myself for president, Vice President Ralitza for the Vice President Secretary, and Shah for the Secretary Committee, Peter Elford for Treasurer, a Public Officer and Committee Member, Kofi for the Committee Member, Darren for the Committee Member, Prasad for the Committee Member, and Pradeep for the Committee Member. And unanimously, we got elected, myself as the President, Ralitza as the Vice President, Shah Jalani as Secretary, Peter Elford as the Treasurer, Darren Marks, Kofi, Pradeep, Prasad will be the committee members. Thank you, team. Welcome to the new team for the 2022 and 2023. I do take this opportunity to thank, outgoing President Peter for all the hard work he did for the last, I think, you've been in the council for the long time, and you've been around more than 6 years as a president, and he did all the hard work, and he brought the community together. So I think moving forward we will be stronger and better. But we want to thank Peter for all the hard work he did, and also want to thank Kevin. Kevin, because you've been the pillar of kind of GCC for a long time, and since I came as a committee member or even before that. So we want to thank you for all the work you did as well. So I just want to thank both of you on behalf of the... and also want to welcome the new team. It's going to be a new beginning for the GCC. So welcome team for the 2022-23. So as part of this one, we also need to do some amendments to the GCC constitution in terms of the association rules, which is not sufficient enough for the non-profit status. So we had to make some amendments, and the copy of this has been available in our website as well. So the proposed change will allow us to continue to benefit from free and discounted for non-profit costs from Google and other organizations, so we could get those non-profit benefit. So I'd like to, put this motion. So who wants to second it? Yep. Darren? Yep, cool. Thank you. So that's been passed. And there's a other one. I think it's still the clause for those two things: a special resolution for the not-for-profit clause and the dissolution clause. So those are the two ones. So for people looking in details, you can look into the website as well. Which you did, which you guys. So if you want to do it again, you got the names right, Ralitza, already? You got the names for those? Yes. Yeah, cool. All right. Cool. So today's agenda, as we were talking about, so we have district strategies and draft territory plan. So we have Ben and his team for the EPST, and then we go to the Landcare in Gungahlin and the Gungahlin Rural Block 348. So these are the things that we will be talking about. So without further ado, I will welcome the District Strategies and Draft Territory Plan team, EPST, Ben Porton. Thank you, Ben.
Just hold that, or do you want me to? Just give it a minute until the slides are up. I'll kick off while we're getting the slides together. Now, I know I don't have a microphone. I do have for the people online, but if you can't hear me, just put your hand up and I'll speak a little bit louder because I do have a soft voice, so I do my best to try and project, so please let me know if you can't hear me. Tonight's session, so first of all, can I just say I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we meet upon today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. In terms of the work that we're here to talk to you about today, it is the draft district strategies and the draft territory plan. And can I start by just acknowledging the contribution that Peter Elford has made in relation to this. And I know that Peter's worked with the Gungahlin Community Council more broadly, but Peter has himself given quite a bit of time to the Environment and Planning Forum over the last couple of years as we've developed this work and also the related planning bill. So I think it's just worthwhile acknowledging the contribution that Peter has made, particularly given that he's handed over the mantle of President. So in terms of what we're talking to you today about, this is not intended to be a workshop on the detail of the new territory plan and district strategies. This is to give you information, to make sure that you're familiar with some of the key concepts, point you to where you can find information, and then talk to you about the ways that you can engage in this work. So this is really, as I said, about information sharing. I'll hand over shortly to my colleague, Dr. Erin Brady, who will talk to you about the district strategy components. We'll come back, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the territory plan, and then Mr. Cameron, my colleague, will talk to you about how you can get engaged in this work. So, just a bit of a recap, if I can. In terms of the three main pillars of the work that we have been doing, there's the New Planning Act, which is now the Planning Bill 2022. That has been introduced into the Legislative Assembly following a 3-month consultation period earlier this year. That's now going through the Assembly processes, so it's been referred to an Assembly committee, and that Assembly committee has called for submissions and is expected to report back to the Assembly and make recommendations, we would expect, by the end of 2022. That will then allow us to consider those recommendations, and we'll make further recommendations to government as to whether or not further amendments are necessary to the bill. The bill was really important to settle first in terms of getting a steer from government as to whether or not the other concepts in the bill were worth investing in, and with that steer, as the government was feeling more comfortable with the draft, that then allowed us to work on the new territory plan with the structure set out in the bill, and importantly to develop district strategies, which is a new scale of development that Dr. Brady will talk to you about for the ACT. In terms of the principles of the Planning System Review and Reform Project, that's along the top there, so just a bit of a recap, and those who have been on this journey with us for a number of years will be familiar with these, but it's about making this easy to use. While we have tried to simplify the territory plan in particular, we acknowledge that there is necessarily a lot of material that we have produced for your comment, but the intention is to make the structure easy for you and proponents to navigate in terms of the planning system. We want to provide certainty and flexibility, and I refer to those two together because it might seem a bit odd that we're talking about flexibility and certainty. You might say, how can you do both? The system, which I'll talk about shortly in terms of an outcomes-focused system, very much about shifting the way that proponents particularly think about development and not just go to the list of rules. At the moment, a proponent will start working their way through what's the height, what's the setback, how much open space in square metres do I need to provide, how many units can I provide, what's the hallway widths, car parking arrangements, garbage collection. But they don't necessarily, and we aren't forcing them through the structure of the planning system to stop and think about, is my development going to be a respectful neighbour? What's going to happen with the spaces left behind? How will people use those spaces? Is this building good for the people who will be using it, but also for the people who will be moving around it? And a comment that I made in the media recently was, is this building going to actually contribute to the well-being of Canberrans, or is it just going to be a building? So that's what we're trying to shift in terms of the outcomes focus and the flexibility. So encourage innovation, get proponents to actually really think about how they can make a real difference to a local area. But what we've heard during the engagement processes so far is that there are certain elements that are non-negotiable. So we have included those elements for certainty in relation to particular elements, but we are trying to keep those the really, really important ones and keep them limited so that there is that flexibility and the ability to innovate more broadly. So with that said, I might hand over now to Dr. Brady, who will run you through the draft district strategies, and then I'll spend a little bit of time talking to you about the territory plan and the structure of the territory plan and how to use the new territory plan. Oh, yes.
Okay, hopefully people who are online can hear me. Hello everybody, as Ben said, I work in EPSCD, and the work on the district strategies in the new territory plan have all been happening in some of my areas, so it's been quite busy. So as Ben said, the district strategies are a new scale of planning. So we have the planning strategy, which is a metropolitan strategy, and it applies to all of Canberra. It identifies within it that there are certain areas that we think that there will be growth and change. The district strategies, as Ben said, it's a new scale, and so we've broken Canberra down into 9 districts. So you can see them all in different colours there. And we've done a draft district strategy, which is this document, but you can access it online. for each of the districts. The first part of the district strategy is the same in all of them, and it gives the metropolitan context. So it talks about Canberra more broadly. What are the government policies that we need to consider around climate change, environment policies, transport policies, housing policies, all those sorts of things that we've considered and worked with our colleagues all across government as we've developed these district strategies. So we've heard from people in health, in education about what they're proposing in different districts or what the needs might be in different districts as they grow and change. So Gungahlin, is different from Tuggeranong. It's a lot newer district than Tuggeranong, so some of the things that we're proposing in Gungahlin are quite different to what we are in Tuggeranong. But overall, we're really looking through the district strategies at where could growth and change happen in Canberra in consideration, as I said, of all of the government policies, but also taking into account in those districts what's important to people, and we did some consultation last year to ask people about that, but also what's important in terms of environment, heritage, culture, those sorts of things, and also with a focus around employment, activity, access to services. So in making the district strategies, we've got all that information and we've sort of layered it together to look at, well, what might be the opportunities in each district. So as you can imagine, in some of the districts there's, and for example, Gungahlin, there are grasslands that are quite important from an environmental perspective in Gungahlin, whereas in other areas it might be different aspects of biodiversity that we're focusing on. So what we did was we identified 5 big drivers that underpin the approach we've taken to the district strategies. So they're around, and then within them we've sort of got some targets, or what are really our principles and objectives around those drivers as we look at each of the districts. So the first one, the blue-green network, that's really about us thinking about biodiversity corridors, grasslands, parks, riparian corridors. In some areas there are creeks that are more drainage channels that flood every time there's a big storm, and they're just big concrete channels, and so we're thinking, can we do something different with those? We did the Healthy Waterways program that's still ongoing, where we've taken a very different approach to how we deal with some of the riparian areas. So the blue-green network, that's a really important aspect of what we're looking at, and decisions around where we think something could change. Sustainable neighbourhoods. So all the districts are made up of different suburbs. They're not focused on the centres, they're the whole district. So we're looking at, okay, well, what does it mean to have neighbourhoods where people might have access to local shops? We know, for example, and that it crosses over a little bit with some of the inclusive centres and communities. We know some local centres probably need a little bit more love and attention, and some local centres have perhaps got opportunities where if we could maybe do some redevelopment there might be some opportunities for housing for people, because we know we need to provide more housing, but we also have heard from people that they want more choice in the housing. They want more townhouses. So we've been looking at, are some of the local centres opportunities for access for services for communities, but also some opportunity maybe for some medium density development. So that's some of what we're looking at, and inclusive centres and communities, that starts to look at, well, what community facilities will we need as areas change and grow and population changes, and it's ageing in different areas, or some have a demographic where there are a lot more children, and so there's a demand for schools, and that's certainly one of the things in the Gungahlin district, and so there's been investment in schools in Gungahlin. Economic access and opportunity across the city. So Canberra has a structure of centres, and so we have been looking at, well, to make all of those centres viable but not necessarily directly in competition with each other, what are some of the economic activities that we might want to stimulate and focus on in different centres? And then the last one, strategic movement to support city growth. As you might imagine, that's a lot about transport and movement, but not just transport. It's not transport just in terms of cars and buses and light rail, but pedestrian and cycle access and those sorts of things. So they're sort of the 5 big drivers that underpin the approach we've taken to the district strategies. And then, as I said, there are some statements there around targets, which are sort of principles and goals that we're aiming for in each of the districts. So go to the next one. So then for Gungahlin, we've sort of set ourselves, and each of those little icon relates back to the 5 drivers. We've set ourselves some sort of big directions that we think are important for Gungahlin. So as you can see, some of that around looking after, protecting, enhancing some of the natural habitat and biodiversity. Biodiversity corridors and biodiversity mapping is one of the things we've done all across Canberra for this. Looking at, we know we've heard a lot about Gungahlin Centre and access for economic development and office space and looking at that. And so we've been working with SLA and really looking at, with the sites that are available for release in the future, what is the best way that they should be rolled out in terms of both commercial and residential development. Enhance public transport connections in some areas. As I said, it's not just all focused around the town centre, it's all of the district. And so there are some centres and some suburbs that are really quite well serviced, some that could probably do with a little bit of help and better connections, whether it's pedestrian paths or bus routes. As I said, we've been working with our colleagues across government as we've talked through these things. There's greenfield development happening in Gungahlin, which is different, as I said, to places like Tuggeranong or Inner South. But development that will continue in Jacker and Kenny is one of the big areas that will roll out and is being planned, as well as some big sites that have been some Commonwealth sites, and thinking about, well, what are the opportunities for some of those sites that the Commonwealth government has owned. And as the last one, just really looking at, well, what are the facilities? And there has been there's a lot of demand for schools in Gungahlin, and that's why there has been investment in schools. And so those facilities are really quite important. So that kind of frames the approach we took to the district strategy for Gungahlin. And so I'll just show you the next slide. Now, I know there's just lots of stuff on there for you to look at, but I'd encourage you to look at this in the documents or online, because this sort of gives you a lot of the information about where we're suggesting there could be opportunities for change, and they're around those 5 drivers. So the legend is actually split up around the 5 drivers. We show where we think there might be some local centres that need a bit more attention. We show some sites. You can see Kenny and some of them and the sites up the top. We've identified some areas for change that we've broken down into proposed, possible, potential. Proposed, you will have heard about. They've either been on the land release program, or someone's done a master plan for them, or SLA is releasing them, or doing development. The possible and potential are sites that you might have heard about, the possible ones, or we might have been approached by a private developer or someone in government about a possible proposal for some land or redevelopment of an area. And then potential, we're flagging as these are some areas perhaps around transport routes, some of the local centres, where there might be potential for some change. If we did some work in a local centre, we might be able to do some rezoning and provide some different housing there. So that map will give you sort of information about what it is we're proposing for Gungahlin, and that's a lot of what we want you to comment and give us feedback on. Is, do you think we've focused in some of the right areas? Do you think we've missed an opportunity that you might think there might be other opportunities? We then have 12 implementation pathways, and again, this is something for you to comment on. They're not in order, so the listing of them as 1 through to 12 is not in order of priority, they're just 12. If you think there are too many, or you think some could be combined, or we've missed something, again, they're the sorts of things that we want comments on. But it does flag that for some of this to happen, there will be the need for intervention from government and the private sector, so investment in infrastructure. I mean, you're all well aware of what change the light rail brought about, not just in Gungahlin, but in other areas. And so we know that there are some things that if government invests in them, it causes stimulation that actually can generate change. And as Ben referred to with the new territory plan, we want to make sure that the change is good and getting the best outcomes that we can. So that's quite important to us. So I'd really encourage you to look at this when you get to the document. The document goes through all those layers and gives you lots of information about what we've thought about and why we might have arrived at that. And then we do pull out some of these special sites and we say, for the development of that site, here are some principles that we think are important about how it should be developed. So I'd encourage you to look at that and have a think about, are there things that we've missed or your feedback on them? And that's really what over the next couple of months that we're looking for. So I'm going to hand back to Ben and he's going to talk about the territory plan.
Okay, so in relation to the territory plan, the territory plan is the key document to achieve an outcomes-focused planning system. So the district strategies are really, really important documents in terms of the strategic planning and filling that gap between the metropolitan scale ACT planning strategy and the en-bloc provisions in the territory plan. What we're wanting to achieve with the structure of the new plan and the introduction of district strategies is to make sure that there is a flow through into the territory plan from the work that we've done at that strategic level in district strategies. The territory plan is often thought about as the document that we assess development applications against. That is true, but it's also the document that proponents go to in developing their ideas about what they might do on a particular site. And that's why, as I said at the beginning, it's so important to get the structure right so that we can make sure that we drive proponents down that path of thinking about how can I be a respectful neighbour? How can this building contribute positively to my local area? So as I said, it provides a stronger link between the strategic spatial planning and statutory provisions. And I'll talk a little bit about district policies, which do connect with the district strategies. You'll actually see the same words as you work your way through, so that we're giving that statutory effect in the territory plan to those key outcomes that are articulated in the district strategy. And that's why it's so important for you to look at those statements in the district strategy and see how they've been translated into the territory plan, and give us feedback as to whether or not you think we've hit the mark. Because what I've said in other forums is that we acknowledge that this work, it's a draft, it needs more work. The way I've described it is it's a respectable product, but it's by no means finished. And we are absolutely keen to hear your views in relation to the various components. Okay, so I might take you now to the next slide, which is a diagram that we've actually incorporated into the territory plan itself. And we've done that so that people can see visually how it all fits together, and hopefully this assists with that. In addition, so you see on the left-hand side there the administration parts of the plan, parts A, B, C and G. We've also included some words to describe how the various components fit together. Again, that's in that spirit of trying to make the planning system as easy to understand and use and navigate as possible for first-time users or one-time users, as well as the development industry or interested community members who interact with the territory plan on a regular basis. The next column, Part D, Part E and Part F, are the most substantial parts of the territory plan. You'll see that we've referred to policies there, and that's a shift away from the current terminology of codes. Codes is very regulatory sounding. It's the codes that we have, as I said, very rules-based, numerical standards, driving people down to not thinking about the broader, bigger picture, but what's the height, what's the setback, what's the open space, but not thinking about how it all fits together. In terms of a hierarchy, district policies, you need to go there first. And this is all explained in the documentation. A proponent will look at the district policies and they'll work through the various components, which you'll see over on the next column, in terms of desired policy outcomes. So they look at those first and start to think about, well, again, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve for this district at a broader scale. Key assessment requirements, that's what I was talking about earlier in terms of those non-negotiables. And then the expected assessment outcomes, which may have some numerical standards, but they're to be carefully considered as opposed to being mandatory. And we do build some parameters around the degree of discretion in relation to those elements. And that's an important point I should make, that when I talk about an outcomes-focused planning system, it's not a free-for-all. It's not complete discretion on what I, as Chief Planner, think is a good idea on a particular day. There is a lot wrapped around this in terms of articulating what we mean by a good planning outcome. And that's reflected not only in the bill, but in the territory plan, and I'll talk about the design guides shortly. Once a proponent's thought about the development at the district scale in terms of what this development can contribute at that scale, then we need to get them to start thinking about the particular zone. So if it's a residential development, multi-unit in an RZ2 zone, they'll go to the zone policies, and that will start to articulate what is expected in terms of that type of development as opposed to the bigger picture district policies. And then you'll see in Part F there are some other policies there in relation to subdivision and leasing. So again, if you're looking to a new estate, you'd be looking at those policies as well as the zone policies. I touched on the light yellow column, so I won't spend too much time on that. Other than to note in terms of the inputs into those elements, you've got the district strategies, as I said, that feed into the desired policy outcomes and the territory plan maps. Then we have the design guides that feed into the key assessment requirements and the expected assessment outcomes. Design guides, I'd really encourage you to look at the design guides. At the moment, the way that we've drafted those, it's called an explanation of intended effects, EIE for short, and it's not the complete design guide. So we have done a lot of work in terms of the various elements and including the provisions in terms of articulating for a particular element, whether that be private open space or solar access, what we expect. But we haven't gone to the next level of then developing all of the diagrams and producing the images that will demonstrate what we mean by that in a visual sense, because the feedback that we've received over the last couple of years is actually showing people really helps, both in terms of community and also industry in terms of what we're expecting. So they'll be able to actually see what we mean by the words. So we've done it in this two-step phase of developing the explanation of intended effects so that you can look at those, tell us if you think we're heading in the right direction, and then we'll do further work to actually fill out and develop those diagrams and images. We've given you some examples so you get a sense of what we mean by this. And there'll be two design guides, housing design guide and an urban design guide, which will pick up on the public realm. And certain developments, which is it's articulated in the territory plan, will trigger the application of the urban design guide. But obviously a new estate would have to consider those, or it might be a multi-unit development of a particular scale that has that interaction with the broader community. And that goes back to a building not just being on a block of land, but how might somebody move through the site? It's not actually visiting the building, but it's actually convenient to move through. And making sure that the spaces are left behind are usable, functional spaces, as opposed to just achieving a rule in terms of providing X square metres of grass. Actually thinking about how we're going to use that space. So that's an area that I'd really encourage you to look at. The technical standards, so these are supporting documents in the light grey. They don't form part of the territory plan proper, but they are referenced in terms of all of the darker grey elements. The technical specifications, this is an area where we struggled a little bit because we felt as though it was really important to maintain a lot of those numerical provisions that people are comfortable with, but we didn't want them to be the first port of call. So the way that we've structured the plan is that they sit there for reference. If somebody is struggling with how to, having looked at the design guide and the images and the diagrams in relation to a particular location, how they might comply, we've got the numerical standards sitting off over here that they can look at and say, well, I'm comfortable with that, so I'll apply that numerical standard. But again, we've flipped this so that that's not the first port of call. You've got to go cascade through the various other elements to actually develop your concept, thinking about the bigger picture. And then the very light grey, there'll be some other documents that are yet to be produced, but there'll be practice notes and some fact sheets, templates for our assessment team, decisions and the like that we need to work through, and training modules. So the government has funded us in the current budget to start working up training, not only for the assessment team, but for industry and the community as well, in terms of how to use this system. That's going to be a key component. So we might then move on to the next slide. Now, this document is one that I would really encourage you. I'm sure you're all very keen to work your way through every page of the new territory plan and all the supporting material. But for those who don't have that level of interest but just want to understand how this all fits together, a little bit more detail about what I've talked to today, look at the supporting report. So it does explain the change to the structure and what we're trying to achieve with that structure. It outlines some proposed policy changes to definitions, nothing substantial there. For example, we've included a drone facility, so that would be relevant for people in Gungahlin. We can approve those under the current definitions, but it's not really clear. So we're just modernising the plan to include some additional definitions. We've made some changes to some permitted uses in zones and some site-specific changes, but importantly, we've also articulated the research and analysis that we've undertaken in developing the new plan and the new provisions. We've outlined, so this is third-party advice that we've procured, recommendations that have been made and how we've responded to those recommendations in developing the plan. So it's about 86 pages long, I think. It was about 150. We got it down to a more manageable 86, but it's a really neat summary document. And as I said, if nothing else, I'd encourage you to read the supporting report. Okay, mindful of time, who's going to, you do this one? Okay, do you want this?
Thank you, Ben. Right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us here today. I'll speak to you now about the overview of our consultation and engagement. So the engagement commenced on the 1st of November and will be continuing through to the 14th of February next year. We've given a period of months in which to be able to engage with community in each of the districts individually and work through these documents in a methodical way. So what we're doing in the first phase of our consultation is what we call the share phase, and that's where we'll be coming out to community to speak in forums such as this, or more broadly with members of the community in community throughout November. The material that we've provided is available for everybody on the Your Say web page, and that's where you can locate copies of the district strategies, copies of the territory plan, and other supporting material that will assist you to navigate those documents. As Ben has spoken about, we have the supporting report, which is a very useful document to understand the proposed changes that we are making through the draft territory plan. Throughout December, we will give the community the opportunity to consider the documents as they are. There's a lot there to read and to go through and to think about. And then through January and February, we'll take the opportunity to listen to the feedback that you have in relation to the district strategies, the territory plan, and in relation to the design guides. And I can premise this by saying, while we encourage you to comment on certain elements of each of these documents, we are really keen to get your feedback in relation to all of the proposed changes and the whole planning system review that's being undertaken. If we could have the next slide, please. So a number of the things that we would suggest that would be useful for comment on, where we're seeking feedback are. If I take you to the district strategies first, as Erin has said, we have a very large document for each district. They're about 150 pages. The first 4 chapters of those documents are common chapters that apply to the metropolitan scale. Encourage you to read and to comment on those as you like. But the chapter 4 is the district specific chapter that applies to each of the districts. And it's in that 4th chapter where you have the opportunity to see how those 5 big drivers apply directly to the Gungahlin district, the implementation pathways that apply, as well as the key sites for change being those proposed, possible and potential sites. And we are really interested to get feedback on or community feedback on those as to have we picked the right opportunities, have we missed those opportunities, and in relation to the local centres that we've said could use some love, are there other centres that could use love? What are the things that you would like to see in those centres that would assist in activating them, and what are the housing typologies that you would be interested in having around those centres? In relation to the territory plan, one of the key aspects that we would seek feedback on is the design guides. They'll be a really critical document in the new planning system, and it's an opportunity for you to engage with it, to provide us with feedback on how you would like to see things built and how you would like to see buildings sit in their environment and in their surroundings over into the future. So I'll keep it quick, noting that we want to give some time for questions, but those are the key topics that we would probably suggest you might want to comment on. We will be doing pop-up events in November in Gungahlin. So on the 21st of November from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Manuka Terrace near the escalators. They've changed. All right, sorry, these are the old ones. We've just changed them. So pop-up events, Gungahlin Village from 10 till 12, and then from 2 to 4 at Gungahlin Village, and then at Amaroo. And we'll have a community workshop on Friday the 18th of November between 12:30 and 2. At those pop-ups, we will have planners available to speak to you, to take you through and discuss the documents, to help field your questions and help you navigate them, so that you can then take the time to consider, provide your feedback and come back to us in January and February when we will be conducting community workshops for feedback. All of these dates are available on that Your Say webpage, so you can register for the workshops on Your Say, or otherwise pop in if you've got the time at the workshops that are set up there. All right, thank you.
Any questions? Yeah, Kevin?
Will we get the opportunity to see what other people are saying and making and their suggestions? In other words, when you go through these things, you don't, you see things, but you don't see everything, and getting some information back from what other people are seeing can actually help you a great deal.
That's a really good point, and certainly we've got our communication engagement team listening in tonight in terms of how we can improve the engagement and consultation experience. So I think there's certainly benefit in that. In terms of the website and the quick comments, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they show up automatically. We can, as we develop the workshop material, perhaps if we've received any feedback or themes up until that point, I can't see any reason why we couldn't start to share that with people at these various sessions. So we'll certainly take that on board as we finalise the engagement strategies.
And along the same lines, these documents we know are hopefully living documents. They will change. You know, your little circle just went to there. It would be really nice to see what you plan to do to keep modifying it and changing it, and also to see how you intend to integrate the economics of things along with the things like the whatever it's called, this well-being measures and so forth. How they are going to be integrated into the physical plan.
Yeah, and the district strategies do address economic matters, employment, those sorts of things, and also there's parts that relate to the wellbeing indicators. So that is all dealt with in the district strategies. And as I said, the important part of this is then to translate that into the territory plan proper, and that's where it's really important that you have a look at those areas of particular interest to you and give us that feedback.
And finally, can you give us reminders? We don't. This is not our full-time job. They're doing these things,
Of course,
sometimes
yes.
you forget to say, "Oh my goodness, I've got to get something in."
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's part of the communications and engagement strategy. There'll be, I'll call it advertising in terms of making sure that it's out there on social media and those sorts of things. But also there'll be the direct communication with community councils in particular. The Environment Planning Forum, this will be on the agenda for each of the next couple of meetings in terms of making sure that we're reminding people about the opportunities and working with key stakeholders in terms of how they can help us get the message out there to the broader community.
There's a lot to absorb there, a lot of information. I think that was one of the comments that Peter made, was that it's very difficult to get through all of the documentation and get a good overview of exactly what's proposed. I think the first point that was mentioned is that Gungahlin is a little bit different from some of the other areas like Tuggeranong and Belconnen, and a little bit of an acknowledgement that Gungahlin was one of the first districts that the ACT government was really fully responsible for the implementation of. And some of the aspects about that is that there's certain things like, for example, Yarrabee Pond might be an example there. I think I even submitted, because you can actually go onto there, click on Gungahlin and submit some responses. And one of the things that I looked at was about the waterways. You were talking about the waterways and how we're looking at those, but nothing was mentioned about Yarrabee Pond, for example, and what significance that made. And I've looked at some works with Yarrabee Pond as the Friends of Yarrabee Pond and found that ESPDD is responsible for a lot of the ponds there. And one of the things that I look at is that it's not really mentioned there, but ESPDD is responsible for it as public land. And so one of the things there is that what's the significance of the waterway project, looking at those bodies of water there holistically when it comes to the facilities that are there, what it's recognised as. Is it just a settlement pond? Is it a recreational area? What sort of funding in the future for planning of these regions? So that's my first question. The second is that looking at the lens of planning through the thing when you're talking about more housing. That was one aspect that you're sort of talking about there. And this concept that government is working very closely with developers in order to look at how we can sort of put more funding into community areas like shopping centres and things like that. And so one of the things that we want to look at from a community is the government looking through the lens as to what is needed for Gungahlin for the future. And so one of the things that we've discovered as the Community Council, when we've talked to government departments, whether it's health or whether it's other different departments, when we talk to them about what's the long-term growth of Gungahlin and what facilities could be positioned in Gungahlin, we find that certain things like Gungahlin being looked at as a possible location for a hospital, for example, Gungahlin can't be looked at because we don't have enough land that could potentially be reserved for something like a hospital in the future. And what we're finding is that Gungahlin is developing at such a rate of knots that even government departments are finding it very difficult to actually find areas that are actually reserved for future use for particular growth, like whether it's a community centre I'm involved in at the moment. And the community centre, with that consultation, we find it difficult because a lot of the people are sort of saying, okay, in Gungahlin East, there's a few different locations where the community centre could be put. Some of these people are asking, what else is going to be in the area? How does that interact with the linear park, for example? And often, a lot of the times, it feels like as if the community itself doesn't know what's going to be built in the future and that we don't really have a 10-year or 15-year plan. So,
I might start with the second one. I think there's a question in there. You sound very much like an advocate for district strategies because you're exactly right. We've got the metropolitan scale, then we've got the en bloc provisions, which is what can you do in an individual block. But in terms of that district scale planning, that has been missing, and that's what we're trying to rectify through the provisions in the bill and actually give effect to these things called district strategies. Our colleagues across government have been very involved in the development of these strategies, and there are some areas where we've identified further work needs to be done, but other areas where we've actually identified on, it's not there, but if you have a look at the map in terms of community facilities and the like. But this is actually about bringing it all together so that there is that plan, and it's the 10-year, in fact I think it's 5-year, 10-year, 20 and 40. Yeah. So I'd encourage you to look at those elements as well in terms of what we've identified for those periods. See whether or not you think we've hit the mark. But you know, I certainly appreciate what you're saying, and this is exactly what we're trying to resolve through this scale of planning.
So I think Casey was a good example where they're talking about, we've been here, we've had the developers come in to talk about how maybe we can put some more housing in there. And that's fine, but often we're sort of saying, well, what about the road infrastructure that exists in that area? If you put a couple of hundred extra apartments in that particular area, the roads are already clogged up and they've got single lanes, as well as a new school that's being built. And only now is the government really, and I know that it's not your department, but only now are they doing a mesoscopic study of the traffic modelling. So it's kind of the horse before the cart. It's like, well, you know, we're approving developments and expanding these centres, but at the same time we haven't actually looked at the core traffic infrastructure even to see whether or not it can support that extra investment. So we're sort of saying, well, it's great that you can get the investment, but is the infrastructure really thought of? And the studies aren't even there as to whether or not more funding needs to be sort of allocated to that. And so that's what I'm wondering about, where planning fits in with the other departments for the future as well. So
I think, as Ben said, a lot of what you're saying we've tried to do in the district strategies. That's why we've been working with all our colleagues across government to say to them, okay, if we think these are the population projections and the growth that might happen in certain areas, then what are your needs? What infrastructure might need to be changed? So working with TCCS and other parts of government around, okay, well, and also factoring in, we want to try and get everybody out of cars as well. The government's got a clear direction around climate change and emissions related to that. So we're also trying to look at, well, what are other ways of getting people to move around and provide services where they don't have to get in their cars perhaps as much. But we've been looking at, well, what is the future? What's going to be needed to support that future? And that's when I mentioned about the government interventions around infrastructure. That is things like, do we need to have more cycleways? Do we need to have, you'll see in some of the other district strategies that if light rail went to, say, Belconnen or to Mawson, then that makes a significant change to what could happen in those areas. It's significant investment, but it changes the way we can plan in terms of pedestrian cycle movement, reductions in emissions, those sorts of things. In terms of community facilities, that's one of the layers that we consider. And I know at Casey, and it's a good example, and as you mentioned, land is in reducing supply. So we're also trying to look at, well, how can we be more efficient with the land that we've got? Where might there be land that we can develop on, or we're going to have to develop in a different way? I think this is trying to get people to think in a different way. The ACT does not have the supply of land it had 25 years ago, so we've got to take a different approach to the way that we can accommodate people. And so we really are, through the district strategies, trying to think of all of those things, working with TCCS, and you'll see in the implementation pathways, quite a few of the things that you've mentioned are in there. We need to do more community needs assessments. We need to make sure that we do the transport analysis, all those sorts of things. So I think a lot of what you're asking is very relevant, and hopefully we've covered it in the district strategies. And even the Yarrabee Pond, certainly healthy waterways, which I used to have responsibility for, yes, it is happening in our own directorate, and we do work with them. And so that relates to the blue-green network, because we've been looking at, are there opportunities for us to treat our waterways and ponds in a different way whether they are attractions or, and we know that some of the waterways have blue-green algae, and so we've been doing work on, well, how do we deal with that? So I think a lot of what you're suggesting, hopefully, we've covered in the district strategies.
Yeah, it's good to see that there's some work on that. One of the things that I'll add, and it's my last question, is that because of the density that exists in certain areas, like, you know, what used to be the business park that was changed to where the large apartment complexes and things are across the road from Yarrabee Ponds, there's a quite heavy density of housing that's there, and that weighs more on the fact that Yarrabee Pond is now their backyard. So they may not have a backyard anymore, and the significance of those areas is actually more significant now because of that density. And so therefore the importance of that area is more important for these people because they don't have a backyard. And so to activate those areas a little bit more so that people feel that they can get out of their apartment complexes that might not have any facilities that are there and actually utilise those spaces a little bit more, I think is important. But when I'm trying to find people to talk to within the government about a plan to sort of look at those areas within ESPDD, I can't find anybody that really concentrates and is skilled to deal with an area like that. They sort of don't seem to really know what to do, and they don't really have a plan for it. So that's kind of what my suggestion is hopefully there could be somebody in the future or a group of people in the future that say, hey, we're looking after this infrastructure. We really need to have some people that are dedicated to this pursuit, if you know what I mean.
And on that note, I mean, I would note we've got lots of skilled, qualified people. But on that note, one of the items in the implementation pathways is about looking at different ways for us around governance. If we have urban projects, do we need to actually deal with those in a different way in terms of across government? So that could pick up on that.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I'm probably fighting a losing battle here from what I'm hearing, but my question is, last year I brought up the same question. The lack of land available for people to build single dwelling townhouses for people who want to downsize. They get into my age group that don't want to live in big houses anymore. We want to downsize, but we don't necessarily want to go into four walls of an apartment or flat. But the ACT government doesn't seem to be taking into consideration that a lot of people would like to downsize, but not necessarily go into flats. They want a single level townhouse that they can have access to, don't have to go up and downstairs, not a big yard to look after. But that's my question. But from what you're saying about the lack of land, well, I think I'm losing a battle.
No, I did mention when I talked about district strategies that what we're looking at around, and some of it is around centres, is could they actually be an area where we do some work in the centre and then there might be opportunities for rezoning there for development that is like townhouses, because we have heard from people. We did a specific project 2 years ago asking people about their housing choices, and we heard loud and clear that people want what's the missing middle, which is townhouses. So that's one of the things we're trying to address in the district strategies, is where are there areas where people could still have access, so around one of the centres where you might still be able to walk to the shops, but you can have a smaller dwelling. So that is one of the things that we're flagging. What are the opportunities for us to do it? Where are some good places for us to do it? It will mean change, but we've heard loud and clear people want to move from some of their current dwellings still in the same area but into a smaller dwelling that's not an apartment. So we're trying to pick up on that in this work.
Well, I know too that the government probably loves to develop multi-storey units because they make a lot of land rates and that.
Well,
So
they accommodate people, and a lot of people love to live in apartments. But what we do is we look at where we think it's appropriate, and we're looking at where we think it's appropriate to have single dwelling and also townhouses. So one of the things that's actually in the appendix of the district strategies is something that's called a transect, and it actually looks at the city, and if you went from a centre and it was sort of higher density and higher and you went out from it, it eventually gets lower density and probably bigger blocks. And we're suggesting that that's probably an approach that we might want to take a bit more in certain areas, and that would include sort of in those middle areas that might be around some of the local centres in the Gungahlin district, for some of that sort of medium, you know, it might be a 3-4 storey apartment, but it also might be townhouses. So we are trying to look at where there are opportunities.
Well, hopefully we might get somewhere, because I think there's a lot of people in my situation.
Yeah, we've heard there are lots of people who want to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, Purden Planning. I've got a lot of questions, but I'll probably save them for another forum. I've started wading through, and I think the Territory should be commended for the approach. I think it's got a lot of potential. I'll keep my question relatively light. I'm just wondering how flexible the district strategies and district policies will be come July, when the policies and strategies are completed. Are they laminated and put on a shelf, or do you have a cycle of update to keep it up to date, I suppose?
I might also let Ben talk to it. The district strategy, certainly we're saying they're living documents, so they will need to reflect change as it happens, and as the context of things changes, we'll need to address that as well. Like we know at the moment, the population, for example, our population projections, they've already caught up with us because the 2021 census data is now coming out again with more information. So we know already we've got some catching up to do in areas. Yeah. But I might let Ben just...
Yeah, look, I was just going to add that while, as Erin said, they may well be updated, you know, might be in a year's time we need to do some work to update because something has changed, it might be 2 years. But to be absolutely certain, what we have done in drafting the bill is we've hardwired a 5-year review, so that there must be a review or a decision to review or not every 5 years, and that aligns with the ACT planning strategy and the same concept there. But that doesn't mean that we can't make changes more regularly.
Good stuff. And in terms of the policies, the district policies, that's hardwired as well in terms of a set process. How much do you envisage after July changes to the district policies? Is this a starting point, and then we start to whittle things down a bit?
Look, it is a starting point, and even what we've got in there now and what's been translated into the Territory Plan may well change in terms of the feedback that we receive over the next couple of months. And then as we review the district strategies, there'll be a need to amend the district policies in the Territory Plan. At this stage, in terms of whether they would constitute a minor or a major plan amendment, it would depend on the particular content.
Thanks, Ben. Before you go, just a quick question. Like, how long do you think this strategy implementation time, and is it a long term or short term?
In terms of when we'll have a new planning system?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can talk to you about the timeframe that I'm working towards, but there are things outside of my control, and they're appropriate processes. So first of all, the engagement is due to conclude mid-February. We will then work on the submissions that have been received and making recommendations to government. We will have already worked through, hopefully, by that time, the Assembly Committee recommendations in relation to the bill. If the bill is passed around May, that will then allow us to commence certain provisions of the bill soon after, which allows us to settle the district strategies and the Territory Plan. What we're proposing is that would all be operational by July. Now, having said that, an important feature of the bill is that once the Territory Plan, if it's passed by the Assembly, and it needs, by virtue of the bill, it requires a resolution of the Assembly to approve. If that happens, it will be an interim plan, and then it will be automatically referred to an Assembly Committee. And we structured the bill in that way because we felt as though it was really important for the Assembly Committee to receive feedback on an operating system rather than the theoretical. Sometimes when you're talking about the theoretical, it's actually really difficult for people to articulate what they feel is wrong with the system, what needs to change. So we've then got the Assembly Committee will make recommendations, presumably, and that will allow us into 2024 to make further amendments, and it goes back to the Assembly for ratification for the final. So that's the timeframe that we're working towards, but that all depends on assembly processes and the like and government decisions. But all going well. We'll have system operational by July 2023 and the final plan, having incorporated any recommendations that the government agrees to from the committee into 2024.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking, some of the things has been listed here. We've been fighting for a long time, so improve economic opportunities in Gungahlin because we have shortage of jobs, so it's not a brainer. We have a traffic every day, like an exodus happening because we don't have job opportunities. And then I think one of you made a point, reduce car dependence. I think rather than saying reduce car dependence, I think because there's a lack of public transport, and if you ask the crowd now, how many of them taken the car? Probably pretty much everyone, because we don't have that thing. And especially with the Gungahlin, it's not connected with other districts. You can say, oh, we have light rail, but you don't have connection to the south, like to Tuggeranong. So some of the things we don't actually need to wait. You can actually fix few things in terms of transport, in terms of Jaka, like when the Jaka comes in, you can duplicate Osbach, the Merabi drives can be duplicated. So some of the things I think, and then protecting the land in the town centre rather than converting everything to the residential. So if you get the balance of the commercial and the residential, the balance right, then we could probably bring those job opportunities, because I don't want to go another 3 years' time and then there's no land to put the jobs there. So those are the things probably you can consider as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I suggest, if there are things that you think you'd like to see happen sooner, certainly let us know that, and that can happen very rapidly. In terms of those things that do require a change to the plan, all going well, it will be July, and those provisions about employment in the town centre, for example, will be in the new plan. Operational, subject then to the committee inquiry, and you all will be able to provide your thoughts in relation to the operating system for the rest of 2023 and into 2024.
Cool, we'll send some midterm plan to you. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I might get my headset back. You left it here. Thank you. So, thank you everyone. I know we can talk with them forever, but we don't have enough time. So let's move on to land care in Gungahlin. Kat, it'd be great if you can come and give us the presentation.
Excellent. I just thought I'd double check because I think Peter asked me to send a PDF.
Yeah, okay.
So it'll be, is PDF okay? Should I send it to you? Sorry about that. So that one there, GCG presentation, sorry. It's confusing because we're GCG and you're GCC. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Oop. Oop. Hopefully everyone can hear me online okay? Yeah. All good? Hi, welcome everyone. I'll just start off by saying Yuma. I'll just take the opportunity to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the lands of the Ngunnawal people and just acknowledge our elders past, present and emerging. So my name's Kat and I work with the Ginadera Catchment Group. So we're a community land care group that works across Belconnen and Gungahlin as well as into New South Wales. Yeah, brilliant. So for anybody who isn't familiar with land care, we're basically a nationwide network of environmental volunteers that work across the country to basically improve our open spaces. So we're what we call a natural resource management organisation. So that's managing the air, the water, the soil, plants and animals. We've currently got 31 groups across Belconnen and Gungahlin, which has increased quite significantly over the last 2 years. We've gone from 19. So I think perhaps maybe one of the positives coming out of the lockdowns was that it gave people a chance to sort of connect with their community spaces, get to know their local environments and really develop a connection to their local country and sort of start to take ownership of those spaces and want to look after them. We have groups that work across rural, urban land care, park care, which is in the reserves. We also have an Aboriginal land care group, an Ngunnawal group. We also do a lot of junior land care, which is with school groups. and then some special interest land care groups that work on things like grassland restoration. We've also got citizen science programs, so that includes the Water Watch and Frog Watch programs that work across the whole of the ACT. We've currently got 6 part-time staff, including myself, and the stat for the volunteer hours, that was from a few years ago, so we're probably well over $1 million annually that's contributed by our volunteers across the ACT. Next slide. Yep, so just a brief introduction for some of our team, if anybody hasn't had a chance to meet them yet. So we've got coordinator, Anka Maria, who's been working on the program for over 10 years. We've also got Bruno, who's our Water Watch coordinator and turtle expert. We've got myself, and then Julian, finance officer, Fiona and Suzanne, who are our project officer and communications as well. So just to give a bit of an overview of the Ginninderra catchment to sort of see how your local community fits in with it. So we've got all of Belconnen and Gungahlin basically, and we actually spread out about 1/3 into Wallaroo and Sutton in New South Wales. So we basically follow the landscape of the Ginninderra Creek and the surrounding tributaries down towards the Murrumbidgee River. Yeah, next slide, thank you. So this is just a bit of a map showing where the groups are in Gungahlin. So we've currently got 8 community land care and park care groups in Gungahlin. We've got some members here today from Friends of Yerrabee Pond, which is one of our newer groups. We've also got Whole Land Care, Moncrief Litter Action Group, who've just recently started getting into local environmental restoration. We've also got the Friends of Yerrabee Pond that I mentioned before. We've also got Friends of Mulligan's Flat that work out across the Mulligan's Flat Sanctuary. We've got the Mullingang Aboriginal Land Care Group who do work at the Gooberdara Ngunnawal Heritage Site out in Franklin. And then we've got one of our new groups, Friends of Harrison Wetlands. We've got Budgingalingi, or also known as Franklin Grasslands Land Care Group. And then we've also got Crace Land Care as well. So just a quick overview of some of the ways that we support our groups and the community. So much like the community councils, we provide a bit of a communication bridge between members of the community and ACT government. We do a lot of on-ground projects as well, community education, planting events, but we also do a lot of advocacy as well. So probably much like the community councils, we'll be putting in a submission on behalf of our members and the community for these district planning strategies. Obviously, we'll be focusing more on the environmental and green space sort of aspects, but yeah, that's a lot of work that we do. So I'm doing a lot of work with the Friends of Yerrabee Pond group to try and essentially hold government accountable to issues that the community might identify. Yeah, different things like that, as well as a lot of planting and weeding events as well. Yeah, next slide, please. So just a quick overview on, I'll try and keep it short because we don't have too much time left, but so we've been focusing a lot on urban environmental restoration, which is, I think, is a big focus, especially for Gungahlin with so many new suburbs popping up. And I think it's really important that we maintain some green spaces for local communities, people in general to go out and enjoy their local community, take your dogs for a walk and feel that connection to nature. And 6 of the 8 Gungahlin groups are working in urban parks, and we currently are helping quite a lot of these groups with some grant programs that we've got for them. This is an example here of one of our new groups, Friends of Harrison Wetlands. So they've done some habitat plantings in Harrison and some really nice pollinator garden beds. So this side here is just bare grass of varying levels of mow. And then basically the group has come in and built this beautiful native wildflower garden bed for local birds and insects to come in and just add a bit more texture and biodiversity to the local green space. And then there's a few more photos of some of the projects that we've been doing out at Harrison. So you can see there, that's some of the plantings that the group's done out there, and that's only been in the last year. So we've managed to do a lot of work over just 12 months. Next slide. And then here's a photo of another event that we did late last year with Friends of Yarrabee Pond. So that was looking at doing some wetland and habitat plantings on the, we've been calling it Amaroo wetland side of Yarrabee Pond. And that was just a fantastic opportunity for some MLAs to come along, meet members of the group, and also bring in some new community members. Great opportunity for people to meet each other and yeah, get to know the space a little bit better. And we've also done some cleanup events as well in Yarrabee Pond. I'll show some photos of that in a little bit. Another thing that we do a lot of, maybe not so much of an issue in Gungahlin luckily, but give it time, woody weeds and other exotic species that come in and really take over a lot of our natural environment. So that's a huge amount of work that we do. You can see there we've got some before and after photos of where some of our groups have come in and got rid of these woody weed plants just to make some space for native species to come back in. So then another thing that we really focus a lot on is community waterway education, as well as restoration projects as well. So you can see some photos here of some community education groups. We've hosted a lot of events with some local primary schools as well, getting kids out in nature and really teaching them about how the environment works, and then also running general community events as well. And then cleanup events has been a really big focus for us over the last couple of years. Anyone who spends a lot of time out in the local green spaces around the ponds will notice that there's a fair bit of rubbish around. So we've been looking to host annual Clean Up Australia Day events at all the wetlands and ponds in Belconnen and Gungahlin. And we've got some great photos there of some of the events that we've hosted, and obviously quite a significant amount of rubbish, including a bike, which I think was pulled from the wetlands at Crace. So yeah, and then I'll just finish off with going through a bit more of the other work that we do in Gungahlin. So there's a lot of environmental monitoring, so people looking at doing biodiversity assessments. We've also got the release of the Water Watch water quality report, which I think was out at the Gungahlin Valley Ponds Hall. So that was a great opportunity for the Water Watch team to meet some of the local community. And then for the next slide, we've got just a few more photos there of some plantings that we've done around Yarrabee Pond and in Hall. And one of the oldest groups in Gungahlin, we've got the Friends of Mulligan's Flat as well, which recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary. Another thing that we focused on that the reps from EPSDD mentioned was grassland restoration. So this is a big focus for our members because currently it's probably one of the most endangered ecosystems across Australia. So we've seen more than 95% of it cleared across the whole east coast since European colonisation. But we're lucky enough in Canberra and especially Gungahlin to have quite a few remnant patches of this really beautiful and unique ecosystem. So we run a lot of research projects with CSIRO and a bunch of our land care groups. And then another thing that we focus on is Aboriginal land care. So we've actually got one of the only Ngunnawal land care groups in the ACT, which is called Mullangang Aboriginal Land Care. So we'll be running some community education events coming up over the next year, engaging the community about Ngunnawal culture, and we'll be running some events out at Goobadara out in Franklin. So yeah, keep your eye out for those if anybody's interested. And then finally, I'll just quickly go through the Water Watch program. So this program is one of the longest citizen science programs running in Australia. And this program has a collection of over 200 volunteers that monitor water all across the ACT, as well as out to Cooma and Yass. So every year they produce quite a detailed report on the water quality across all the rivers and creeks in this region. And it's a fantastic, anybody who hasn't had a look at it, I definitely recommend you check it out. It's a really good way to sort of track and just make sure how your local wetlands and creeks are faring, if there's been any incidences of pollution and things like that. And finally, I'll just run through the ACT Region Frog Watch program. So this program runs an annual frog species census throughout all of the ACT, and this runs throughout October. We also do an annual Tadpole Kit for Schools program, which helps educate primary schools and preschools across the ACT about the life cycle of frogs and how they fit into the ecosystem. And we also run programs looking at community education, climate change, and bioindicator studies as well. So the next couple of slides just shows some photos of events we've run over the last 2 years. We've got a lot of planting events, education events, weeding, cleanup events, and even just some chances for community to get together and have a barbecue, have some chats, and yeah, just to get to know each other a bit better. I'm just finish off with an explanation of where our future work is going to be for Gungahlin. So we recently were lucky enough to get an ACT Nature in the City grant. So we've got about $10,000 to fund community park restoration across at least 6 sites in Gungahlin. So if there's anybody here or anybody online who's listening who has a local park and you think that there's some people in your community that would be interested to look at restoring it, we've currently got 2 sites, one in Ngunnawal and another site in Casey we're looking at. But if anybody has any other ideas, feel free to get in contact with us through our Facebook page or our website, Ginninderra Catchment Group. Yeah, brilliant. And if anyone's got any questions or feedback.
Are you buoyed by the fact that a lot of the ACT government has what appears to be a keen interest in waterway restoration? So just what ESPDD were just talking about a minute ago, which I think was really interesting, was identifying the waterways. There seems to be a lot of federal government contributions as well as ACT government contributions towards water quality. And recently with the floating wetlands that have just been put into Yarrabee Pond, do you think that these are really going to contribute to the health of the ecosystem in the water?
That's a good question. I think it's probably an amount of how much, I think. I mean, not being an engineer, but I imagine if you put in enough infrastructure to filter out a high enough proportion of the stormwater, eventually it will have an effect, a positive effect. I guess it's just about us figuring out, and I think this is the stage the ACT government is currently in, where they're just trying to trial a bunch of different methods and see which ones work best, which ones fit in best for the community and give the most value for money. So I think at the moment we're still in that sort of exploratory stage where we're sort of trying to work out how we can retrofit our urban spaces with these water sensitive urban design features. But I think, and you see it a lot in the Gungahlin suburbs where these are actually built into the way that the suburb's designed, which I think is fantastic. I think it saves a lot more money if you can plan the suburb around having these nice culverts and drainage channels and wetlands that will filter the water before it gets into Yarrabee Pond and the creek. I think that's probably a better way to do it. But because so many of the older suburbs have been here for so long, we're sort of in this awkward stage now where we've sort of got to go back and renaturalise these spaces. Yeah, I think, I mean, even if they don't improve the water quality, still the biodiversity that we see at these wetland sites, and even just the community amenity, like people can go down with their kids or with their dogs and, yeah, really enjoy the space a bit more than if it's just an empty mowed field.
And do you think that the community and the residents that live in the area have a role to play in the health of these ecosystems as well? It's not just a government responsibility, it's a community responsibility as well.
Yeah, I think definitely if the community's interested, I think it's definitely beneficial. I mean, over the last few years, we've seen such a massive increase in not just the number of groups, but the number of new volunteers we've had join up with our groups. I think that it's a really great way to meet new people within your community. I mean, our groups are so diverse. You have people from all ages, from preschool kids all the way up to 70, 80, 90-year-old retirees, people across all cultural backgrounds. I think it's such a great opportunity for people to meet people in their community that they wouldn't otherwise and really get to know each other.
And did you recently do something in Moncrief? Because there appears to be, as you go past a whole area that's been transformed essentially with plantings and things. Was that a community group there, or was that just a local initiative, or what was happening there?
So there's been the Moncrief Litter Action Group has been a community group for a while, but we've just recently sort of found each other, I guess, and we put in an Adopt a Park grant with them to sort of re-establish. There were some old beds planted around their big Moncrief suburb entrance sign, but they've sort of gone a bit into disrepair, and so the local residents decided, because that's sort of how you come into the suburb, it should be a little bit nicer.
Because that looks quite dramatic, like quite a dramatic transformation from a community-based group, so I think that's really good.
Yeah, and they've only been working on that project, I think, for the last couple of months. So, and they've planted a whole bunch of trees as well through the waterway up the back. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you. Any other question, Kev?
We pay, I think it's 30 cents for every kilolitre to essentially to looking after the waterways.
Yeah.
How much of that do you guys get? If you'd like to have a discussion let's have a little discussion afterwards about this.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I'm not too sure. Some of it might filter down to us through government structures, but it doesn't. Okay. No. Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Brilliant.
Thanks, Kat. That was great.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for having me.
All right. Last but not least, but we're going to have a presentation on the Gungahlin Rule Block 348 about the retirement living concept in aged care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. You'll be pleased to know I did cut mine down aiming for a 10-minute presentation tonight. So my name's Claire Gilligan. I have been in development for a long time. I have been battling planning systems across multiple states for a long time, trying to drag it towards outcome-based development. So I started working in Gungahlin. I worked and led the project Crace, or the development of the suburb of Crace, and I started on that in early 2007. Which now seems a long time ago. So that's 14 years ago. And at the time, what we were working to and what we designed in was very leading edge, environmentally sensitive urban design with a lot of stuff under the ground that dealt with water and water quality and water sensitive urban design. 14 years later, my head has moved an awfully long way up the spectrum. So Crace now would be considered to be about green, I guess, to sustainable development, which is about do as little amount of harm and hopefully a little bit of good as you possibly can. And as you move up sort of sustainable or environmentally friendly development, you move up to sort of a restorative development level. And right at the other end of the spectrum is what we call regenerative development, which is socially, well-being, environmentally, on a whole range of indicators, place, people, species, environment is actually better for the development than not doing it. So that's sort of where the objective is sitting now. No one really has pulled that off at a community level in Australia yet. It's a very ambitious target, but we would like to have a crack at it, and hopefully we'll get a presentation up very shortly. And I can show you what we've been thinking about. So 348, I do have a lovely regional map that can show you exactly where in Gungahlin it is. It sits on the corner of the Barton Highway and Gungahlin Drive. It's 36 hectares, currently occupied by the CSIRO, and is one of the 6 sites that apparently now sits in the Gungahlin district strategy, which I discovered tonight, so that's rather interesting. The site was sold by the Commonwealth 20 years ago to private owners with a 20-year lease to the CSIRO. That lease is coming to an end, and the site has some pretty special features and values on it that leads us to need to think about what that site is going to evolve to next and what it's going to house next. So it's coming. So I'll show you some lovely photos, but on the site, online you can see some beautiful photos. There is an absolutely outstanding 2-storey Georgian Victorian sandstone mansion called the Gungahlin Homestead. It was originally built in the early 1860s and then extended. The big Victorian extension happened in the 1880s. Very few people, it appears, in Canberra actually know this building exists because it's never been open to the public. It was in private ownership. It was owned by the Crace family. And then it was bought by the Commonwealth as one of 3 federation estates when Canberra was created. So it's been in the Commonwealth government hands since the early 1900s until 2002. So we're going to have an open day on the homestead on the 19th of November, and we'll share a Facebook link to the Gungahlin Community Council so everyone can know about it. It'll only be the 3rd time in its history it's ever been open to the public to come for a little wander through and actually see what's there. Yay, awesome. We have some good photos, I promise. So yes, that's an open invitation to the public between 11 and 3 on the 19th of November. Nothing's, no grand plans, no grand event, just opening up this building. The CSIRO has just finished the make good as its lease is coming to an end. So it's really a blank canvas at the moment, and we'd be really interested for people to come and have a look and share ideas about what you think, what role it could contribute in the future. It is definitely not big enough for a hospital. Definitely not. 800 square metres isn't going to get you a lot, and it's not a very adaptable building, so that was going to prove a bit of a challenge. Oh, lovely. Oh, hold on. Is that the right one? That's okay. We'll keep moving through. So we have a vision to create a regenerative retirement living community on Block 348. Regenerative development, and as I said to you, is sort of really pushing right at the other end of the spectrum of what you would consider to be environmentally sensitive design. The other thing that we've adopted is what is sort of known as a design for country approach to the development thinking, which is really partnering with our Indigenous partners to both ask country, how do we restore country? How do we bring country back? What is the next evolution of country? How do we celebrate and understand and share the cultural values of the place? But also importantly, you take a design approach where you design equally for all species. So you design habitats and homes equally and hopefully within an ecosystem or a living system headspace. So everybody is dependent on everybody else, or everybody is coexisting with everybody else. It's a bit of a sidestep. It's very outcomes-based. Thank you, ESDD. This is a very outcomes-based development approach. I'd suggest we're probably a little bit ahead of where the territory plan is probably going, but that's okay. Can we keep moving? Is that all right? Lovely. Okay, finally I can show you where she is. So we're on the corner of obviously the Barton Highway and Gungahlin Drive. And it is no doubt a site everybody has driven past a million times and never looked at. I know I certainly have. Mainly because it's very hard to see into the site. The whole site is ringed by very large mature trees. So from the Barton Highway, it's actually a sheer, a completely blocked wall of green, which is rather nice. It makes it quite special on the inside, but you sort of have to be on the inside to see the site. So here is the Gungahlin Homestead, a pretty substantial building. Can't see it from off the site, so very few people appear to know that it's here. I certainly didn't. I was born in Canberra. My parents were born in Canberra, and nobody knew that this building actually was on this site. CSIRO has, and the Commonwealth, to be fair, have done an extraordinary job of maintaining the building and the fabric of the building. It doesn't, no, and it never, the site has never had public access. So the 19th, as I said, will be